Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Now, as you can see, I've changed up the lighting just a little bit. I personally have gotten sick of the off-white color that has been the backdrop of these videos for the past, I don't know, 6, 7. And I decided to change things and make it just a little bit more natural. And speaking of changing things up, this video is going to be about a project instead of a product that we normally review and go over. And this project I've been working on for about a week now. It just requires a few things to be finished, but also those few things will be covered at a later date in different videos. So without further ado, here it is. This is a High Cut ACH. So a lot of you guys are probably wondering why I've high cut a perfectly good ACH. Well, let me preface things by saying that the Advanced Combat Helmet is not a terrible system. It's been used since around 2003 and has been issued to many military and law enforcement personnel since then. And ever since the GWAT days, it saved a lot of soldiers from injuries that would have otherwise been fatal or life-changing. However, the ACH is a play off of the older MICH, that is Modular Integrated Communications Helmet system. And while the MICH system was a newer design and it was allowed to be worn over a radio headset, it began to fail in that respect when pelters became standard issue. Now, pelters are traditionally worn with a headband, and that might not necessarily be a problem, but problems began to arise more with the earmuffs and the radio cables. With the radio cables, it came from a person having to put the ACH on over the head and over the radio cables too, and the chin straps would often get tangled while putting it on and then taking it off. So that was one of the issues. The second is that the earmuffs also enlarge my head silhouette, and while the MICH and ACH systems do have that flare at the bottom, sometimes it just isn't enough, because I have worn pelters with an ACH before, and after a while of working in them, or when temperatures begin to get a little bit hotter, it starts to overheat just a little bit, and my ears start getting hot, and I'm constantly moving the muffs around trying to get some form of airflow to my poor head. And this ACH also wasn't just a personal experiment, it was also inspired by SF guys, because in a lot of SF units, most of them carry radios, and with those radios, they normally have headsets. And they began cutting their helmets to allow more of that airflow and more of that comfort, even though they were sacrificing just a little bit of that ballistic protection. Now, as for my cut, I have used a jigsaw, a Sharpie, and a lot of JB Weld. If you don't know what JB Weld is, look it up. So when I first got the ACH, it was a normal ACH cell. It had the flare at the bottom and everything. And I decided to change that up just a little bit and make the High Cut ACH. And the first thing I ordered for it was these rails. Now, the rails allowed me to get that point of reference to cut it. I drew a line over the flare out, and once those lines were drawn on both sides of the helmet, I took a jigsaw to it and I began cutting it. Now, cutting it into those aramid fibers and Kevlar is a bitch. It took me about it took me about 2 saw blades and a whole lot of huffing and puffing. And I was worried that I might compromise the ballistic integrity of the helmet in doing so, but I made sure to slap JB Weld on it almost immediately after I made the cuts. Now, the High Cut ACH in the conventional armed forces did not last long. They were replaced by the Soha helmet for a short time, but in 2005, Ops Corps introduced the FAST system. Now, FAST stands for Future Assault Shell Technology, and what that did is it retained the cut of the High Cut ACH and therefore had less coverage, but it also allowed the wearers to have that ability to wear comms comfortably without creating the hassle that the original ACH cut had. Now, Ops Corps still makes reputable helmets to this day. Their RF1 can stop up to a 7.62x39 leg core round, so I definitely check them out. I have linked their products in the description below. I'd also recommend checking out Team Wendy or Highcom for great high cut helmets as well. So keep those in mind. There are different manufacturers on the markets, but there are only a couple that make actual tried and true helmets. Now, for those of you who are wondering, oh, why don't I just get a Chinese helmet that offers ballistic protection, because if I get shot in the head, I'll be dead anyways. That's not so much the case, because remember what I said about the OpsCore RF1 and what I've said about the other companies that are both tried and true. China suffers from a lot of quality issues. Now, the helmets that you get from them might either be way too heavy and offer no ballistic protection at all. They're just there for weight. And all that weight is transferred to your poor neck. And if you ever get shot in the head, then God help you. So that's why I recommend looking into a great source. It's definitely worth spending the extra money on a brain bucket, because you're protecting what's in that fragile little skull of yours. Now, I know this helmet is no OpsCore, but it does have a decent setup to it. So starting things off with, we're going from the front here. I have installed a universal shroud. Now, there are a lot of questionable shrouds that you can use. You can use the standard Neurotos ones. You can use the OpsCore Vast shrouds. Neurotos has a universal mount. I found that this CNC aluminum bought from a friend of mine works very well. Not really sure what company it's from, but it's held up to nods and different mounts over time. So I'm not replacing it anytime soon. And with it, I just have a standard United States government-issued Neurotos shroud. And it's held in place by these bungees on either side that are attached to the arc rails. Now, as for the arc rails, installing them was easy. They flared out just a little bit at the back here when I was first cutting this helmet, but after torquing the screws down, they sit pretty flush. And on these arc rails, I have installed Peltor Comptact 5s for hearing protection. Now, since this is a solo project and I'm not currently worried about working with other individuals just yet, I run just the hearing defender variants of these, but the Peltor 5s also have the ability to mount a boom mic and a radio cable if need be. More on Peltor and electronic hearing systems later. Now, these mounts are from 3M, same company that makes Peltor contacts. And what I like about these mounts is that when they're not in use, or if I need to cool off my head, I can simply just pop them out and let the earmuffs roam free. And if I'm using comms, the distance between my ear and the muff itself means that I can still hear what's going on through the radio. If I want to set it down properly or store it in a bag or something, I can just rotate the muffs back, and while it does look kind of goofy, it does have its merits. Also on the rails here, I have a Surefire X300. This is one of their older models, so it doesn't see a lot of use anymore compared to the X300 Ultra or Alpha or Bravo. So I attached it to this helmet, and what that does is it allows me to work freely with both of my hands while at the same time providing a decent amount of light. As for lights, the the Surefire is a great choice, but there are also other different manufacturers on the market. You have Princeton Tech, who makes the MPLS. Now, the MPLS is a lower profile light device with a light on one of those little bendy things, and what that can do is you can point it at whatever you're working at instead of a fixed mount like my Surefire here. And the Princeton Tech MPLSs also have the ability to change between different colors or even an IR setting, so I definitely recommend checking those out. As for the sides, I just have standard Velcro for my spear patches, flag patches, tactical cat ears. Just kidding, I don't really subscribe to that, but for those of you who do, you do you. In the back, I have a Krydex Mohawk, and this Mohawk is multifunctional. So back here, I have a strip that looks like it might hold shotgun shells, but in reality, I keep it for batteries. Now, if I'm using nods, I can change that game up just a little bit, because nods, or NVGs, or whatever you want to call them, add a significant amount of weight to the front of your helmet. So if I have this down with just a PVS-14 monocular, or even dual or quad nods, it tends to weigh a lot in the front. And I'm sure those of you who are in the armed forces or have served have struggled with keeping your head up while looking through a PVS-14 because of all that weight in the front just dipping down, and it's never a good time. So that's why I definitely recommend investing in a good counterweight for your helmets. Now I can switch these batteries out with these little, I use these lead weights, these little eggs as they're called, and they're about 3 ounces each. So depending on what I'm using, I can put a corresponding amount of weights in there and I can perfectly balance my helmet out. Now on the back, I have a MS-2000 strobe. It's not nearly on par with the modern Hellstars, which are a little bit smaller and offer different colors and options like IR or red, blue, and green. But the MS-2000 is what I've currently had in my inventory, and as you can see, it functions perfectly. Now if I want IR capability, I can just put the shield over it, put it down, and voila. Now I can only be seen if somebody has night vision or IR optics. So that's a really neat part about this Mohawk. And it's just secured to the helmet using Velcro, so if need be, I can take this off at any time. Now, another thing that a lot of helmet users, I think, look over is camouflage. There are camo covers on helmets, which are great, but sometimes covers on helmets just aren't enough. If you're operating in a heavily forested environment or there's a lot of foliage around, you might want to invest in a camo scrim, and that's why I have here. I've just installed a bit of a camo net on it, and what that does is it provides just a little bit of depth and camouflage from what would otherwise just be a walking tan shell. So I definitely recommend looking into getting your own sort of camo scrim. Those of you who watch Band of Brothers might be a little bit more incentivized to do so. Now, as for the overall helmet setup, you might be wondering why I have so little on it. Now, your heads are very fragile little things, mind you. You know, one bullet in the wrong spot and you might be dead or put into a coma for the rest of your life. And I personally don't want to live out the rest of my life as a vegetable. But you also have to think about the rest of your body, because think of it this way. I have this helmet on my head, right? And with it, I might have nods, I might have counterweights, I might have some unnecessary things that I might not need, such as batteries along the side or chem lights and such. And all that weight is transferred from your head down to your neck, spine, shoulders, back, and goes further down. So I want everyone to keep in mind that every inch you add to your head and neck is a liability. So definitely think carefully about what you might need. That also goes to say for buying helmets, because while the OpsCore RF1 might stop against rifle rounds, you got to think how long you might be wearing a helmet for. Because if you're a SWAT guy and you're conducting a house raid that might be over in, say, 40-ish minutes, I'm sure you'll be fine. But if you're out conducting a dismounted operation that goes for 5 hours or more, especially with all the other stuff on it, it might start weighing on you just a little bit, and that can lead to some pretty bad damage. So please put your bodies first instead of just simply looking cool, and choose your helmet setups wisely. Now, this ACH is definitely a great helmet, but I am looking forward to getting a different setup in the future. I might set it up the same way that I have the ACH, but I'm looking to replace it with an OpsCore or Team Wendy helmet. So this won't be the last video on this topic, so stay tuned. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more, and make sure to get that training in. You know, if you have a helmet that you want to set up and LARPing, by all means, go for it. Go out in the woods with a couple friends, you know, camp. Just wear it for all that time and see what works for you. See what you don't need, see what you do need, and for that stuff that you don't need, just keep it somewhere else. But other than that, that's all I got. See you guys next time.